concern for us, and I wonder, do you have a chance to look deeply into that, to see why it was increasing, and do you take any action or any measure to stop or minimize it, I would say?
Yes, and before I answer that specific question, I think also cover the quarterly comparison, which is the first quarter of the year compared to the second quarter of the year. Because they won't remember, and I don't want to be fully transparent here. If you look at last year to date compared to this year to date, violent crime is up over 60%. That's significant. It's one of the biggest jumps I've seen in my law enforcement career. Robbery is up 100%. Aggravated assault is up almost 60%. These are very big numbers that do concern myself. I know it concerns the community. I just listened to many speakers say it concerns them. And they're right. It's not a perception. These numbers are numbers. They're statistical certainty. And most crime actually goes unreported. So the actual number of crimes is greater. As far as our efforts, quite honestly, we're just trying to stay afloat. We do not have enough officers. This was illustrated in items of interest that was sent to council back in, and you did bring a copy with me, back in January of 2022, comparing the Westminster Police Department to other departments in Orange County that are similar size. We compared with the two agencies in the county that were closest to having the same population as Westminster. Two closest cities are a little smaller, about 10, 12,000 people smaller, yet had a police force about 10%, 12% larger than ours. When we looked at their violent crime, our violent crime was greater than theirs significantly. So it wasn't due to activity, we had more, and it wasn't due to population size, as we had more there as well. That was sent to council. Again, it's in the statistical certainty because it's in the numbers. So we just don't have the resources to be proactive. Right now, we're lucky to be sending police officers when somebody calls 911 and we have to show up. We just don't. You heard one of our homeless liaison officers get up here and tell you that, hey, he doesn't have resources to do what he wants to do. He's the only homeless liaison officer. You might be thinking, oh, we have two. Well, we do have two, but one, unfortunately, in a fight was injured and is out, and we don't know when that person is going to be back. We're so thin when we lose somebody, we don't have a backup for them. Right now, we only have 11 detectives. Well, 7 of them are busy doing homicide work and can't investigate or thoroughly investigate other crimes such as rape, aggravated assault, sexual assault, domestic violence. Those take a back seat because we're short. Even though when we compare with those other cities around us, they have more officers for less crime. So right now, as a police chief, again, I know I told the council before this, I'm making sure that our primary function is met. And that's when the community calls 911 and goes, my God, it's 3 a.m. in my backyard, breaking in, phone line goes in, if we get an officer at the scene, and that's our primary focus. That's reactive, not proactive. I would love, as a police chief, looking at these numbers and fighting crime. They have proactive teams to go out there, deal directly with the homeless. Not one guy, but several guys working with homeless liaisons to deal with that. I would like a team of officers going out there and targeting crime that's occurring. But we don't have that. We're answering the 911 calls because we're short officers. Now, in addition to our numbers being smaller, we are still having problems recruiting. Now, we're up 10% from the last time you heard me talk on this matter. So that's a good thing. But I do fear that the unstable environment is going to create another hole in our I was looking around the room earlier, and I do try to keep my finger on the pulse, if you will, with this. There were senior officers in this room tonight that I've had conversations with that have already applied elsewhere because of the uncertainty. And I don't blame them. They have families to feed. They're scared. People that are are attracted to this profession, like myself, like Councilmember Doe, want stability. They didn't try to go into professions that regularly lay people off, or might not be fair and equitable in advancement and advanced stability. And when we take that away and say, hey, we don't know if we're going to be here in a few months, that's hard to compete with. And that scares me as chief, because in today's market for law enforcement, the whole nation is short cops. The whole nation. And we just don't want cops. We want people that will pass the background, pass the polygraph, pass the psychological examination, and then get on the job, learn it well, and treat people fairly. And everyone's competing for those. And when they look here, they see a not stable environment. So I hope that answers your question.
Your point is Your points are very well taken, and I heard that you mentioned that the whole nation is same mood. That means it's not only the city of Westminster, right?
Some worse than others, but that is correct.
And with the current level that you have right now, you mentioned that short resources. How much more resources that you need? What the percentage was?
So I can give you some numbers. In 2005, when the population was only 88,000 people that lived in our community, we had 105 sworn officers. Today, we serve a population of well over 90,000 people, but we only have 90 officers. So while the population grew, our sworn officers went down. And on top of things, compared to last year, crime was up. Because a little over 62%. So not only did the population grow, that crime went up, you know the numbers, a great amount. And we have less resources to throw at that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a couple questions for you, Chief. Thank you for all the information you provided so far. So what is the ideal number for our city, the size of our city right now?
So right now, we compare it, and there's a number of ways to ask that. Right now, it's going to be opinion. But if I try to stick to numbers, so it's not really opinion, and if we went back to 105 and we were policing 80,000 people, even though we are policing more now with a greater level of crime now, at least we're back on the path. The other problem is, even tonight, the council said, do it, we want 105. We're going to have people leave with the uncertainty. Even if council takes the uncertainty out of it tonight, we have people that are already in the process. We're losing. It takes me 18 months to get somebody off the street who will pass all the testing and get them mission ready on the force. And to give you an idea, it was my #1 priority when I came on about 10 months ago, and I've only been able to move the needle up 10% in our staffing to fill vacancies. This is very, very difficult to do.
So where are we competitively with other cities? Like what? Can you give me some numbers as far as what we're up against compared to other cities as far, pay, benefits? Where are we? The total.
So HR has a comp study. HR would probably be the better entity to answer that question. But yes, we are still low for a general answer. We are still low. I actually had a discussion with the city manager yesterday because we're getting beat out with recruits. To give you an example, one of our recruits, we get somebody into the academy that paid $21 an hour with no benefits. A lot of the people we are trying to hire are family people. They understand the big picture. They have some life experience. Well, when another agency from anywhere around us comes in and goes, we'll almost double that hourly rate and we'll give you benefits starting on day one for you and your family, that's hard for us to hold on to that.
So you're saying we're not very competitive. What I'm hearing.
Correct.
So currently, with the staff that we have, are you advertising calls, like you said earlier?
Yes, we do. And that is violent crime first, and that is with violent crime, that means if they're all tied up on crimes against people, then the way of life crimes go unanswered. for long periods of time. And I hear a lot of people at these council meetings come up, and rightfully so, they have homeless issues in their neighborhoods. I understand that, I feel for them. But homeless calls take us a long time. And that person, the example I gave of the lady home alone, going, somebody's breaking in my house now, it's 3 a.m., that's going to come first.
So, I mean, it's no secret, I mean, we all have around our city, myself, like everyone sees it. We had a lot of homeless living in our city that we had, 2 years ago,
Yes.
4 years ago. Do you think you attribute that to less resistance compared to other cities? Is that why they're coming here? I mean, I'm not here to network. They network.
Vice Mayor, they absolutely never. That is true, you're incorrect. There are cities that are half our size that have the same amount of homeless on the staff on the police department. I cannot compete with our neighbors to the north when they have 4 or 8 officers working that, and right now I have 1. That, by the way, is always getting redirected to go help with the 911 calls that are coming in. Because again, I have to make sure as police chief that those kind of calls are being handled first. When somebody calls, when you call and go, oh my God, I'm scared, there's somebody in my house, that has to be answered first, not the homeless person that's creating a way of life issue in a neighborhood or something like that. And it's very hard to deal with a giant border where you have, anytime you have a homeless person doing something in that other jurisdiction, they're able to, and when I say push, I don't mean physically push them into our jurisdiction, but when the police are able to go out there and deal with the messes they're making, the violations they're committing, and those kind of things, each time it happens in a time manner, so they can walk into Westminster and go, oh, the cops are tied up. And when you call, it takes 2 hours, they show up at all. They move to the name.
That's resistance. Thank you for that, Chief. Appreciate it. And I just wanted the community to know you heard some of the stories that we just went through. Even though our police department has faced some big challenges, they still take the time to get out there when they can to address some of the community concerns, as we did. One of the residents mentioned volumes of our police dedicated. It's one of our councils in that even though we faced stories, there was a whole neighborhood had concerns about homeless individuals. There was a fire, there was an explosion along the freeway that was literally behind somebody's home. We've had, and I was surprised, very surprised when I walked up that we had the police chief there. Commander McCormick was there, Sergeant O'Neill was there. We had an officer, a CHP officer there. We had our city manager there and assistant city manager there. These folks there are doing their best that they can with what they have. So thank you guys. Thank you for all everything you do. And I want to say,
If I can interrupt for a moment, I really appreciate the kudos, but I've got to tell you, I think it is the time and the place where a lot of police officers came up here tonight expressing their First Amendment right to talk about the tax measure. I do want to say that the officers that stuck around after these tough times really care about the city. They're paid less. They have to work harder than police officers in other cities. Clearly, I have the numbers to support that statement. They're busier. They have to write more reports. They have to arrest more subjects. And I have the numbers to prove that in cities a similar size. So they're harder working for less pay. So they are sticking around clearly because they care. And I saw that in them coming up here. I didn't know who was going to talk or everyone was going to talk. And they came up here just to express because they care about the safety of the community. They truly do. So I appreciate the thanks, but I'd rather convert it, and I know you'd probably rather convert it now to them.
yes, thank you, Chief. Again, I mean, I just want to say, we see the numbers. Councilmember Wayne did a good job as far as, requesting these items. But it is, time is up, and with less funding, it's only going to get worse. And I just want to say, it is our job to protect our residents, and we need to start doing that. So, thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and second to approve item 3.9.
That motion is made by Councilmember Nguyen and seconded by Vice Mayor Alonso. Councilmember Doe? Councilmember Paul?
Yes.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alonso?
Yes.
Mayor Tom?
Yes.
Motion carries by four.
Item 5.1, declaration of past land sale in action.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. This is a cleanup item. Back in January, staff presented a report entitled Additional Information Related to City Property Land and Sales Transactions from 2006 to current. When that research was being done for that staff report, we found some discrepancies, and there were several properties, 5 that were never recorded. They were purchased by the city from the successor agency, and 3 of them were recorded, but they were recorded out of sequence. So when they were sent to the county just recorded them out of sequence. So this is a cleanup item that property has already been transferred by the council and purchased by the city from the successor agency. But for transparency purposes, we wanted to bring this to council for your approval.
So I really appreciate your presentation. Any question or reserve for our member on the city council regarding this item?
I'd like to
Those are
move, receive and file.
I just had a question before we go. I know that we're taking some steps to prevent this from happening, correct? This sounds to me like maybe this was just an oversight from the past.
I believe it was. I believe it was an oversight, and then the other one was just recorded incorrectly at the county.
Thank you.
I know the staff report says receive and file, but these are deeds, so I just want to make sure, if we can just have the motion to authorize the recording of these deeds, just to be clear.
Move to authorize the recording of these parcels.
There's a second. Second.
All right, we have a motion and second to approve this item as recommended.
Thank you. That motion was made by Councilmember Holmes, seconded by Councilmember Doe, and that includes the mayor and city council authorize the recording of these parcels. Councilmember Doe?
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alonso?
Yes.
Mayor Tom?
Yes.
Motion carries by zero.
In the summary, item 5.2 to plan going one and achieve financial stability. Consider extension of sales tax measure. Proposal consideration of resolution ordinance placing the measure on November 8, 2022.
Cái này mới là vô cùng chính, cái này là mấy cái mà nãy giờ mà bao nhiêu cư dân lên là người ta kêu gọi là phải thông qua cái dự luật này.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and members of the community. Tonight's discussion is truly twofold. First, we're discussing the extension of a transactions and use tax or sales tax measure because the City and Council has committed to a strategic plan, and this discussion is part of that plan. But secondly, more importantly, the overall financial state of the city and the fate of city services warrant a robust discussion as the sales tax measure approaches its expiration. Back in 2016, the council then placed a measure on the ballot that gave the voters an opportunity to decide on their quality of life through the consideration of a sales tax. that tax came with a sunset, and that tax is expiring December 31st of this year. So for the past several years, and especially in the past 5 months through our strategic plan, staff has worked tirelessly to provide a comprehensive overview of what losing a large revenue source would mean for this community. Tonight, staff is presenting the essentially the culmination of the past 6 years and the financial challenges we faced, the challenges we currently face, and the ones that we will face. This presentation is going to seem very familiar. We've presented these points before, but we as staff, we would be remiss if we did not provide the council and the community with the stark reality of our finances once again. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Assistant City Manager, Adolfo Ozeda, and our Finance Director, Aaron Bax, who will be presenting this presentation with me. So with that, I turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adolfo Ozeda, Assistant City Manager. I'd like to start off with the PowerPoint. I'd like to start off with a little bit of history. Westminster's finances have likened Scooby?
We don't have that on our street. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. So I'd like to start off by providing a little bit of history. Westminster's finances have relied heavily on the state of California's redevelopment funds to do the following: to maintain basic services and staffing levels, to provide assistance towards business development, provide support of low and moderate income housing, and support community-based programs. A little bit more history. When the state of California eliminated redevelopment, Westminster was left with a huge budget shortfall that resulted in the loss of $30 million annually and $54 million in reserves paid to the state per dissolution. This led to massive layoffs across the entire organization. We have still not hired back from that, from those layoffs, by the way. Reduction and elimination of services throughout the city, and the depletion of city reserve funds. Now, we've heard a lot today about Measure SS and the passage of Measure SS in 2016. Through Measure SS, the will of the voters in the community, the city was saved from inevitable bankruptcy. Significant cuts to services and staff were made prior to that night. Staffing levels have remained at minimum levels, and many programs that were eliminated have not been reinstated. As we heard tonight, it automatically expires on December 31st of 2022, this year. The city will lose approximately a quarter of its budget, $17 million of its operating budget, $17 million of its operating budget. At this point, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Finance Director Aaron Bax, who's going to talk a little bit about property tax rate.
So you mentioned property tax rates because the city was had a lower tax rate years ago. So this particular chart shows all of the cities in Orange County and the property tax rates, or the percentage of the property tax that they receive. Westminster is included, and for Westminster it shows 9.5, but that includes 7.35% that goes to the general fund and 2.16% specifically dedicated to the municipal lighting. But Westminster has one of the lowest property tax shares among Orange County cities, and we're shown in the red bar here on this chart. And the reason we have one of the lowest shares is because after Prop 13, we were locked in at a lower rate. Our residents pay the same 1% property tax that everyone else does, but the revenue that comes back to the city's general fund is only 7.35%. There is nothing the city can do to increase this percentage, and the only cities lower than Westminster are structural fire fund cities, which means that they don't pay for the fire service. Oops, I went too far, sorry. don't pay for their fire service out of the general fund. The city So this slide shows the OCFA cash contract city property tax rates. So Santa Ana receives 18.6% of their property tax, San Clemente 15.7%, Seal Beach is 14.9%, Garden Grove 13.7%, Stanton 12.3%, Tustin 11.6%, Glen Park 11.4%, and Westminster shown at 9.5%, but again, 2% of that is dedicated to the municipal levy. This chart shows the Westminster property tax allocation, so how our 1% is split. So 71% of that goes to schools, that's the largest percentage. But that doesn't mean that our schools receive more money, that just means that the state gives them less money. So more of that comes from the property tax and the state doesn't have to give them as much. And then Westminster's on here at 7, the 2%, the yellow pie chart or pie slice is municipal lighting. And you can also see that Midway City Scan receives 4%, which is just 3% lower than we receive in our general fund. And also this shows that the state continues to take Westminster revenue. So even after Prop 13 was locked in and we were locked in at our 7%, the state came back and took more property tax with the ERAC shift. And as Adolfo mentioned earlier, with the loss of redevelopment, that was $30 million annually to the city, 12 million of which was directed to the general fund that we use for services and projects and things that we now are paying for out of the general fund. So this slide shows the money that we have received in the general fund from Measure SS. So when it was for over the total, or over the 6-year total, we're estimating 81.5 million because we have until December to get to that, to get to our actual number. But also, you can see that the first quarter was at 3 million, and the first year was 1 quarter and 3 million, and it has grown. So we have gone from the first year of 12 million to our estimated for 21-22 of 16.7 million. Under the Revenue and Tax Code, the maximum combined rate of all transaction and use taxes may not exceed 2%. So currently, OCTA, the county has a 0.5%, which means the city can only impose a 1.5%. That percentage could reduce if another county or another agency adopted a transaction use tax and left the city without the ability to offer that option to our residents. A decision to renew the city's transaction use tax would help the city to maintain local control over a portion of these available tax revenues. This slide shows local agencies or local cities and their tax rate. So currently 310 individual cities have enacted local revenue measures in California. These are the ones around us. So Fountain Valley has an 8.75% rate that started in 2017 and expires in 2037. Garden Grove also has the 8.75 with no expiration date. La Habra has 8.25% and expires in 2029. La Palma has 8.75 with no expiration date. Los Alamitos, 9.25 with no expiration date. Placentia, 8.75, no expiration date. Santa Ana has 2, so they have a 9.25 that expires in 2029, and then it goes down to 8.75 through 2039. Seal Beach, 8.75, no expiration date. Stanton, 8.75, no expiration date. Westminster, 8.75, expires on December 31st of the current year, 2022. Long Beach and Lakewood are on here just for comparison purposes. They're close and our residents could shop there, or maybe do shop there. Theirs are 10.25. And Long Beach expires in 2027 and Lakewood has no expiration date.
Karen, if I can add to that too. Most of the, if you notice that on the chart, Westminster has the shortest sunset time, whereas the other ones have a minimum of 10 years all the way to just no expiration. So that's the general consensus of that.
Also, by law, no measure of proceeds can be taken by the state. So if the city has a measure, the state can't take it.
Now back to talking about what Measure SS has brought us. Services sustained through locally generated funds. We've addressed homelessness through the hiring of 2 homeless liaison officers. We've maintained fire protection and prevented cuts to the number of firefighters. We prevented cuts to the 911 emergency response system. Supported residents and local businesses through matching grants and programs. We've invested $7.5 million in street improvement projects. We've protected water, drinking water supplies. We've maintained local jobs, prevented the elimination of police, narcotics, domestic violence, sex crimes, gang, and human trafficking units. We've recruited and retained Spanish and Vietnamese speaking officers, and prevented the loss of trained officers to other cities, and recruited collateral police officers to the city of Westminster. Unfortunately, there will be impacts to city staffing levels. We're already seeing these. As the locally generated revenue source nears expiration, it has been harder to attract and retain employees. Currently, there's 24 vacant positions, including 10 police officers. Uncertainty of the local sales tax measure and low pay are the 2 major factors in 100% of the resignations that are provided to the Human Resources Department. It's harder to recruit qualified employees to fill those vacant positions. Long-term employees are actually leaving the organization, resulting in a loss of institutional knowledge. This next statistic is very telling. Percentage of applicants interested in job opportunities. So, for recent recruitment part positions, of the 100 people, 100% of the people who clicked to open the ad or the advertisement through the website, only 1% actually followed through with an application. For recent recruitments to full-time positions, only 3% of those actually followed through with an application. So it's very, very difficult to fill positions, and it's a huge loss to the community to lose people with institutional knowledge. I'd like to turn it over back to Aaron just to talk about the 5-year budget projection.
Okay, so like Adolfo said, this is a 5-year budget projection. The first column, 21-22, is the estimate for the fiscal year that we just finished that ended June 30. And based on this estimate, we're looking to contribute to our reserves about $3.4 million. The 22-23, the second column of numbers, is our revised budget that was just approved by the council on June 22nd, I believe. It was a status quo budget, so there are no cuts, but it does use $9.2 million of reserves and includes half a year of Measure SS. The third column, the third, fourth, and fifth columns, so 23-24 through 25-26 are projections. So in fiscal year 23-24, if we continued at the status quo level, we would use or end up needing to use $20 million of reserves. This does not include any Measure SS revenue as it sunsets in the current fiscal year. And if we were to use that $20 million of reserves, we would be left with $8.6 million of reserves. So we're starting the current, or we ended 21-22 with an estimated $38 million. By 23-24, we'd be down to $8.6 million. Now, if we continue to the next year, 24-25, we would need to use $21 million of reserves to continue with the status quo budget. We wouldn't have that. So we would be out of money by November of 2024. So that's the 24-25 budget year, but about 5 months into it, we wouldn't have any more reserves. Let's see. So then obviously 25-26, we wouldn't have any money at all. But in order to prepare for that 24-25 year, cuts don't happen overnight. So we have to start planning with the next budget cycle. So starting in July, we need to start looking at cuts and options in order to continue services, because we can't take a budget with no money. We wouldn't have the funds to continue at our current service levels. I also want to point out, and this slide shows it well, that in 23-24, we're short $20.4 million. The measure SF brings in that year's projection about $7.3 million. So even with the measure, we're still short $3 million. So I just wanted to show that it's not like it brings in, it keeps the lights on, it keeps us going forward. But it's still, we need to be frugal, and we need to look at other options to come up with an additional $3 million.
Quick question, since you mentioned that number, what would have to, since we have to make up the change, what would that look like as far as, because obviously we're at $5.3 million in parks and waters, what would that look like as far as cuts? I mean, how do you make up $3 million?
It's we'd have to look at service levels. We'd have to try to come up with some creative revenue ideas, maybe for additional sources of income. We can look at other options, and we can bring services to council or ideas for reductions.
We had conversations in the past, but some of the ideas that have been brought forward so far, those all take time to implement.
They do.
And it takes time for it to generate whatever revenue comes out of it. It doesn't sound like
it's still, we still get by. So, in that year, and we've had some years even up until now where we weren't sure, and sometimes vacancies, like Chief said, we have some trouble filling positions, and that's citywide, so sometimes that comes in and helps by the end of the year. Sometimes we have, I don't know, not necessarily additional revenue, but sometimes the projections can come in higher, sometimes they come in lower, and then we'll stop. But it doesn't give us any wiggle room. Costs are going up. Salary costs go up, pension costs go up, contractual costs go up, so we do account for those in those projections.
Would you please go back to, I don't know what's the slide number, but the funds received from measures? I have a couple questions for us here. First of all, what is the revenue that we bring in for the measures for each year?
This shows, so each of these years, so in 21-22, the estimate is $16.7 million. 22-23, we budgeted $8.8 million, so $68 half a year.
For the years 17, 18, 19, it's around 13,000.
Yes, 13.5 million, 12.7, and then fiscal year 2021 is 14.5, or almost $14.6 million.
I'm trying to understand the budget issues here. I remember, I heard that the assistant city manager just reported that we don't stand the measure. It's going to be $17 million. Where do we get this $17 million?
That's the pension commissioner. So the revenue has gone up. Sales actually have increased, as you can see in this chart. And some of the sales are actually development. People are doing a lot of construction on their homes. Gas prices, all of that contributes. So we're receiving more money. So the $17 million is the estimate for a full year. The current year, yes.
So the projection
Our funds are 100% designated for COVID recovery, so it has to be related to COVID recovery. It cannot be used to fix our deficit, and those funds cannot be expended to solve for our general fund.
Can you shed some light that, is there anything here that being affected by the COVID that we had a couple of years ago? Can we, so that we can use this fund for that?
Well, we had presented a list a few months ago regarding some of the ideas that we could allocate those ARPA funds for. There are very strict federal guidelines as to what you can use that for, and there were specific project-based type things. So, like, for example, you can allocate some of those funds for homeless, right? So we're talking about a navigation center, potentially brought it up a few months ago. ARPA funds could be used for that funding. It's definitely not something that we're talking about in terms of our general fund. It could help with the senior meals that we've had, the increase. We developed a much more expanded senior meal program during COVID times, and that's something that those funds could be used for, but it's not meant to sustain the program at the time. Staffing is the same thing. For example, if you want to use the ARPA funds for staffing, you've got to be able to prove that particular staff function is directly solving something that's COVID related. So let's say, for example, you want to use the ARPA funds to fund a dispatcher. You're going to have to prove that particular position is basically supporting a function that needs to be supported because of COVID, because of whether it's an increase in crime, because of COVID, or something along those lines. So there are very specific things that ARPA funds can be used for, but it is not to solve the deficit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Our city manager already explained about our fund, that being the federal funding that our city will receive from federal level during the pandemic. But I believe that for the last 2 years, all of our staff activity or anything about the city staffing time relating to COVID. And all the support that we had given to the community, that all relating COVID. That's what I believe. That's why that our city will receive from the federal. So I think that as long as we're able to prove that our expenditure relating COVID, so we could able to reimburse ourselves. Am I correct?
So I think you might be thinking of, so there's the ARPA designation, which was the federal fund allocation that gave cities a particular amount, but there was also a FEMA reimbursement, which I guess Aaron can talk more about that, in which we were recovering costs, but that was not with ARPA.
We also, it was a care money that we received county and the state allocation. So we received $1.1 million from the state and another $1.2 million from county. But we did use that to offset salaries for staff and mostly public safety, because we could use it to increase public safety. Our police were dealing with the impacts of COVID directly, and we did use it to offset costs.
Yes,
So
but
that put less restrictions of carries money in areas that we are going.
so, but I believe that we already received half of the amount from the care funding.
We received all of the care funding, and actually we received all of the ARPA funding as well. It hasn't been allocated, but it has been received by the city.
These are one-time funds.
Yes.
These are not ongoing.
The ARPA, we want to receive half of it, huh?
We actually have we received the second tranche just last month.
Okay.
So we have it in a special revenue account.
And then a total amount about 22 million, right?
23 million?
You mean,
It's about 23 million, but we would designate about $1 million for, and that's a high estimate for administrative costs.
and then the money go directly to our general fund, correct?
No, it can't go directly to the general fund. It's founded separately for specific, COVID-related type projects and expenditures.
You cannot count on that money to fix the issues.
We can't use those funds to solve this problem.
Could you say that again? I don't think you understood.
You can't use these funds to solve this current problem, in case you didn't hear.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to slide 15. So this slide is just a review of the presentation that staff provided as part of the strategic plan goal of achieving financial stability. And the objective was to provide council of impacts that the sales tax measure was not renewed, and that was brought to council on March 14th. So as our report said, there would be deep cuts to basic city services limited to only mandatory essential services, with money given away from services which seek to enhance the quality of life or development of the community. 75% of Westminster's budget is dedicated to public safety, so there would be significant impacts to the number of police available to patrol neighborhoods, loss of specialized officers and units, including gang and drug units, investigations, and retention of Spanish and Vietnamese speaking officers, and substantial reduction in the city's ability to support the residents and business community.
Next, I will walk you through some slides focusing on the impacts to city staff and services, major reductions that will change the landscape of Westminster. These are typical slides that I deliver, so please bear with me. Under administration, city council category, we will eliminate technology, equipment, and supplies, eliminate funding for conferences, training, and memberships, eliminate stipend for paid commissioners, and disband all commissions not required by law. In the city manager's office, we would maintain only the city manager position, eliminate all other positions, including the assistant city manager, economic development manager, senior administrative analyst, administrative analyst communications, and administrative assistant chief. In city clerk, we would maintain only the city clerk position as required by state law, and eliminate all other positions, including the assistant city clerk, administrative assistant too. We would be unable to meet agenda preparation deadlines, response times for request for public records, election filings, and state-imposed deadlines would be delayed. Under human resources and risk management, maintain only the human resources risk management director position and eliminate all other positions in that department, which includes 2 human resource analysts, 1 human resource specialist. There would be delayed response and review time to claims that will result in increased liability to the city for payment of unresponsive claims. And it would decrease, there would be a decrease in oversight, which will lead to overall increase in liability to the city. In finance, we would maintain the finance director / treasurer position as required by law, and eliminate 4 of 6 employees who cover accounting, payroll, accounts payable, purchasing, and cash receipts. A lack of staff will create inability to segregate duties and eliminate checks and balances in the finance department process. Delaying payment or refunds or services to outside vendors, consultants, residents, and businesses. Reduced City Hall counter coverage and the ability to respond to the public, including processing counter payments. Under community development, we would eliminate the Community Preservation Unit, otherwise known as CPU, and support for the following services: the Homeless Liaison Officers for Homeless Services, Shopping Cart Retrieval Program, Trash and Debris Removal and Overgrown Weed and Vegetation Abatement, graffiti abatement, public right-of-way issues such as unpermitted work on parkways and sign removal, parking or storing vehicles on unpaved surfaces and inoperable vehicle enforcement, unpermitted signage and that. eliminate management analyst position. So the first item on the agenda really is real estate. So as a comparison, no support for real estate, business license, outdoor dining program, and other operations. No new grant applications or special projects could be initiated or administered. Under community development, maintain planning manager or senior planner position and eliminate all associate and assistant planners. This would have a major impact on development citywide. A significant reduction in available counter hours, phone and email services, delays in processing development applications, an inability to maintain state-mandated application processing timelines, significant extended wait times for scheduling of inspections, delays in business plan check turnaround times, no special projects or programs could be undertaken. Necessary actions such as state-mandated zoning code updates could be delayed. And the next one is key because it's really tied to revenue generation. Delays in project management and delivery of key developments such as the Westminster Mall and other plan-specific plans. Under community services, eliminate community services director, senior center supervisor, and 2 community services coordinators. Senior center would become a part-time facility. No activities, classes, events, transportation for seniors, outreach, or support services for seniors. Basic nutrition meal programs would remain, and we would eliminate the Project Shoe program, which is focused on improving the lives of at-risk youth through after-school programs. Youth center programs and services would be eliminated. No youth sports, summer or after-school programs, and reduced access to the very popular splash pad due to the lack of supervision. Under community services, eliminate community promotions and programs, eliminate printed brochures and other marketing material. No city special events would be held, such as Safety Day, concerts in the park, movie nights, community pop-up events for Santa and Easter and other holiday events. No oversight over private special events taking place on public or private property requiring permits. No management or oversight over crossing guards and a reduction of city-funded crossing guards throughout the city. Under Public Works, eliminate 16 full-time positions and 14 part-time employees. There will be significant impacts to parks. Close all parks from public access and use. No graffiti cleanup or median maintenance. Impacts to streets and street maintenance and other infrastructure. There'll be a reduction, pothole filling, concrete repairs, drainage services, and sidewalk cleaning. The next one is very important because it's really a breach of contract. Inability to comply with maintenance of effort spending requirements for streets, resulting in a loss of $1.7 million of measuring funds annually. We have an agreement with OCTA that we will receive turn-back funds through their tax measure if we provide a maintenance of effort. We would no longer be able to provide that maintenance of effort. That breach of contract would result in an annual loss of $1.7 million. We've been able to maintain traffic signals and other safety equipment. Impacts to building and facilities maintenance. There would be no staff or budget for plumbing, electrical, HVAC repairs, and painting. No cleaning of buildings or setups for facility rentals or events. Still under Public Works, impacts to fleet and vehicle maintenance. No staff for repairs and maintenance of city vehicles, including police, public safety vehicles. Impacts to engineering. There would be no staff for engineering design, construction management, and inspection. We would no longer be able to pursue and obtain grant funds for new projects. There are no grant funds for maintenance anywhere. That's just not something that exists. So a lot of the repairs that the community sees out in the community are actually grant-funded projects where our engineering team worked collaboratively to expand the scope of work so that we're actually improving existing infrastructure under the cover really of a new project, which is part of how projects are built out. But without matching funds, we would not be able to pursue any with obtaining any grants. Just to provide some perspective, in the years that I've been working here, 18 years, working with Jake and others in the department, we've easily brought in more than $65 million just for transportation-related improvements. And all of that money came with matching money. Without matching, you can't get $65 million. So you put in $6 million over 18 years, you get $65 million. There is no 100% grant funded project, and grant funding does not cover maintenance of any kind.
Sorry to interrupt. You're saying how much do we depend on grant funding to get things done around here?
Anything other than paving, because the turn back money and there's CDG funds that come for paving, right? Other than your street paving, which we're behind. We were once in a good spot, we've fallen behind the paving. Any other project that you see that's nice in the city is grant funded. That's just the best way to put it.
Before we continue, sorry to interrupt everyone, before we continue, I need a motion from the speaker to extend the meeting time because right now it's
Motion to skip past this.
we have a motion second to extend our meeting time.
Thank you for your patience. We're getting close to the presentation. So picking up on, did I answer your question, Vice Mayor?
Not yet.
I'm sorry.
We need to vote.
Councilmember Bill?
Yes.
Councilmember Hall?
Yes.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Yes, just want to make sure that who made the motion and who is second.
I'm sorry, the motion was made by Vice Mayor Alonso and seconded by Councilmember Hall. Vice Mayor Alonso?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Powell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0 to continue press.
Thank you. So you covered that. That includes all roads and intersections, school zones.
That's a very good point. So, any improvements? So, for example, recently we got a $500,000 grant for safe routes to school. So we're going to go out to the community. We're going to engage the public. Perfect timing after COVID, and we're going to compile a list of needs that the community, particularly focusing on the school zones for K through 12. That was grant funded. That was pretty much 100% grant funded. It's a study. It'll generate a bunch of essentially project-ready grant applications. Every single grant application that comes out of that report, which could be $20 million worth of money coming to the city to improve traffic signals, crossings, flashing beacons, install new signals. But again, when we get creative, we're improving the signal, we got it all out, we replaced it 100%, asphalt, concrete, and everything. All of that money wouldn't be there because we wouldn't have the matching funds to go along with each of these grant applications.
We can complete the study, but we don't have the funding, we can't do anything with it.
Well, it'll be a doorstopper.
Help me out, I'm trying to understand the issue here. Can you go back to the 5-year projections slide? Okay, I believe that we recently approved the status quo for this year, right? This year,
2023, that's correct.
22. Okay. And the reserve balance of 29 million. Yeah, correct.
Correct.
Okay. My question is that what you just present with the potential impact and the reduction, if there is one examination,
The grant process takes some time. So right now, we are in the process of starting some pretty important projects for the community. Moving forward, it's really kind of a legal question to some extent, because even if right now under status quo we have matching funds go after and project statement, I think we have $500,000 because we're fully budgeted for the year. We put in the $500,000 for a project, but with that grant application comes a commitment from the city that usually goes through legal that says that we're able to maintain this facility for the next 20 years, 10 years, and things of that nature. That's where it gets a little bit more complicated right now for us, really.
Okay, by looking at the chart here, the projection for 22, 23, 24, we check it if we don't extend the assessment here, and we are going to use about $20 million of the reserve, and the reserve balance is about $8.5 million, $6 million.
$8.6 million, yes, that's correct. If we continue in the next budget year, so 23-24, starting July 1 of 23, if we kept the status quo budget, we would be projected to use $20.4 million of our reserves, leaving 8.6.
So, picking up kind of in the middle under impact engineering, and related to the comment that Vice Mayor made, third bullet under impacts engineering, inability to conduct state-mandated safety assessments. So that's another important component. Currently, we're able to either hire a consultant if it's a reasonable cost, or go after grant funding to conduct these safety assessments. We would not be able to conduct those without the funds. The last subsection here, reductions in existing maintenance contracts. We would reduce park mowing to weekly, from weekly to once a month, and eliminate weed abatement in public right of way. Cut park watering in half, and reduce a quarter of tree trimming budget, which would impact claims that are possible due to fallen trees. So moving on to the police section. This is the last section of the reductions. Under police, reduce the police force by 33%, which would be equivalent to 26 sworn, 17 non-sworn positions, and 25 part-time positions. And Chief Lane provided really good statistics earlier in previous item. Addressing homelessness, we would eliminate both homeless liaison officers and the recently approved by council community outreach workers. No specialized units to complete homeless encampment cleanups or address other homelessness issues. No HLOs or community outreach workers to provide direct impacts and services to homeless residents. Homelessness-related issues will increase. No response to non-emergency homeless calls. So that's very important. That priority to come out just to engage the homeless population would no longer, we would no longer provide a response for that. Impacts to coordinated efforts with neighboring cities, Caltrans and CHP. Again, our staff's been here for a long time. They know who to call. People come when we call. We work well with our neighbors. We can't ask our neighbors to help us if we don't exist in the capacity to help them in return. So that mutual aid is gone. Emergency response, increase to emergency response times. Victims would wait longer for police to arrive, even for emergency calls such as in-progress domestic violence, robbery, and assault. No resources to respond to most non-emergency crimes such as theft and non-violent disputes. Traffic enforcement, increase in traffic collisions, including fatalities. If you don't work speeding, you don't work the streets as a motor, speeds will go up, and there's nothing we can do legally to reduce speeds or maintain speeds on a roadway. That's just the way that the law is written in California. So the inability to have traffic enforcement inevitably is directly connected to fatalities and to severe accidents and to other driving violations. Parking violations will go unaddressed, and associated revenue will be lost. And that is a very healthy revenue source that I'm sure Aaron can add to it.
I was just going to ask you, on some of these, some of those items you're mentioning would be a reduction in revenue.
Yes, so like under the traffic enforcement and not working traffic, that's a life safety decision. And we are saving lives by essentially citing people for speeding.
Yeah.
People don't have no life speed, you're not for speeding. If you don't work the streets get more dangerous, and there's more collisions, and there are more severe types of collisions. As far as parking violations, there's the reactiveness of getting out into the community. and addressing parking concerns when they arise. And then there's the street sweeping program, which is a revenue generating source that Aaron's pulling up some numbers on.
350,000 is what we're budgeted for the next, or for the current fiscal year.
You don't have officers to follow sweeper and those issues, and that revenue source is not. And again, street sweeping directly related to pollution, directly
I was
related
just going to ask you, so the street sweeping is meant for keeping trash out of the ocean?
It is exactly an environmentally friendly program. It is not intended to generate revenue, but the only way you assure compliance is by ticket.
Can I ask a quick question, Aaron back? You don't have to turn back the slides, just regarding the reserve. $29 million, currently correct. How long does it take us to save up to reserve, the reserve to 29 million? I believe it's like 2 to 3 million a year.
We have contributed 2 to 3 million a year for the last few years. So as part of the budget, we provided 5 years of history. So if I go back to 2016-17, we had $20.8 million. As I had said, the 21-22, so the year that we just finished, we're estimated to have 38.2. And then after the status quo budget and using 9.2 million, we're down to 29 million.
No, I'm just asking, how long did it take us to save $29 million?
Well, 6 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Crimes reports and investigations, elimination of the jail services and staffing contract. Patrol staff will spend less time patrolling the streets and responding to calls for service when tasked with booking and housing arrestees. Most crimes would not be investigated. No crime prevention efforts or investigation of cold cases, and a delayed turnaround for police reports, information, and other paperwork to the public. All community outreach, still under police, all community outreach programs would be eliminated. Eliminate detective from Drug Enforcement Administration Task Force. Again, directly related to revenues. Revenues received from seizures would be eliminated. Resources associated with this task force would also be eliminated, so we would be suffering from a mutual aid perspective. No public safety presence for special events and assignments, council meetings, tent parade, school events, national night out, public safety day, public memorial services. Our police are imperative to essentially the function of all of these events. They would no longer be present. Under fire and ambulance, in speaking to Aaron, we would need to renegotiate or explore renegotiating the fire and ambulance contracts. This would result in service level reductions, increased response times for fire, paramedic, and ambulance services, potentially leading to the closing of fire stations in the city of Westminster. So at this point, I'd like to return the presentation to our city manager.
So just really quickly, it's important for us to know what the residents feel are priorities, and so we conducted some strategic outreach surveys of the residents likely to participate in the upcoming election. The most recent outreach was conducted March 25th through April 6th of this last year in English, Vietnamese, and Spanish, and the results showed a strong desire by Westminster voters to have an opportunity to consider continuing locally controlled funding. The statistics show that as much as 77% of the respondents are willing to approve an extension of locally controlled funding at either the 1% or 1.25% rates. They also indicated they were interested in retaining the power to end the measure at any time. And so those survey results are in the staff report, but they're also on the website if anybody wanted to look at those, at what those priorities are. But the priorities that were on the list included addressing homelessness, fighting gangs and drugs, preventing cuts to police patrol, protecting drinking water supplies, and so forth. And there were basically a lot of what we've already discussed. Those who responded to the survey identified those as important priorities. That's it. And so for tonight, we are putting out there 2 possible versions of a proposed sales tax measure. The first one is a resolution in the corresponding ordinance, which would renew the city's existing 1% voter-approved transaction and use tax until the tax is ended by the voters. So again, that would be no sunset. The approval of this measure by the voters would keep the total sales tax in Westminster at the current rate of 8.75%. Second version is a resolution and of course corresponding ordinance which would renew the tax but at an increased rate of 1.25% with no sunset, and if adopted, it would bring the total sales tax rate in Westminster to 9%. Do you want to know, because we did talk about 17 million versus 20 million or so, even if we renewed at a 1% rate, which is what we currently have, generating $17 million, the city still faces a minimum $3 million budget deficit annually. That is just attributed to, the rising cost of just doing business, and of course the liabilities that we currently have.
City Manager, before you go on to the next slide, right there where it says, but an increased rate of 1.25, that wouldn't be an increase of 1.25, that'd be an increase of 0.25.
It is, the increase itself is 0.25, but the rate is, and actually it's 1.25.
Yes, but the way you written it sounds like you're increasing it 1.25.
No,
Yeah.
we have an existing 1%.
Yeah, we have an existing one, so you say the way it's worded, you're not increasing it to an extra 1.25.
So if I was talking really quickly, it's a rate of 1.25, that is the increased rate. It is not increasing 1.25. But we do have to note that once the sales tax expires at the end of the year, it really is a 1.25% increase from the state's base rate. So.
That's right. All right, thank you.
So basically, at this juncture, we will no longer be receiving locally generated revenues after December 31st of this year, which again, that's $20 million of deficit spending annually until the depletion of our reserve funds, which puts us at bankruptcy or out of reserves in November 2024. Even if we place a measure on the November ballot, the city will already out the door lose approximately $4.2 million, and that's because we wouldn't be able to start collecting the tax until April 1st of next year. If a measure is not approved in November, the city will lose approximately $4.2 million per quarter, again, until we run out of money. And of course, external factors such as inflation and recession may also contribute to additional budget shortages. There could be other expenditures that we have that unexpected that we would also lose funds as well. So absent a substantially large revenue generating source, the loss of Measure SS at the end of this year will undoubtedly change the way services are provided with the city. The quality of life for the residents and business community will be negatively impacted, and this actually places the city in a worse position than prior to the approval of Measure SS. All of the components that we've laid out for the city and city council and the community point to the fact that we have been essentially, for lack of a better term, keeping the lights on for the last 6 years and even before that. And so, as this leadership is trying to move forward with some of those creative revenue generating ideas, those things do take time. And so, at this point, without a large revenue generating source, this is the state of our city. This is where we will be by November 2024, completely out of money.
I have a question, City Manager. On the staff report, on page 5, you explain if this council chooses not to face this ballot measure in the November election, and somehow has the idea that the next council is going to face this ballot measure and a special election sometime in March or April of 23. Here you're explaining that we will lose 3/4 and we will lose 4.6 million. Right? Can you speak on that so everybody understands?
Sure. So if a measure is not placed on the November ballot, and let's say hypothetically, the next council coming in would be, the first meeting in December. And so you've got a certain period of time in order to call for an election. So let's say hypothetically, in December, you call for an election sometime in late March, early April, depending on when the election falls and when the votes are certified. Let's say it's approved at that point. Then you have that 110 days from a particular point in order to, to start collecting. So let's say if it's in March or April, then you've got to set out a order. We wouldn't be able to collect that tax until October 1st of next year. So essentially, this fiscal year, we would be completely using half the year of reserves because we would have lost from January 1st to June 30th. And then for the next fiscal year, we're already using, we're already using reserves absent the measure, but from July 1st to September 30th is a guaranteed no tax collection because we have to sit out. So that's why, in the narrative, we say we lose, over $4 million every quarter. So every quarter is a $4 million cost. I would say to keep in mind too, in considering an election, a special election does cost more money. We did get an estimate from the Orange County Register of Voters, and it's not reflected on the staff report because we just got it. But we would be looking at potentially upwards of about $430,000 for a standalone special election.
Hey, I was just going to add to what you just said.
So we have someone at the panel who has a hand up too. Maybe Catherine would like to speak.
Let me just briefly say that under state law, there's the way it's worded, you have to wait 110 days from the date that the election is certified. That's going to put you past July, even if you held an election in March or April. Again, she said this, what I'm saying, just the way the state law is written, it would then have to be pushed to October 1st before you can start collecting the tax. So what being said there is that you would lose 3/4 of the tax if you held the election in early 2023.
So, what I'm hearing is we don't have, if today, council does not vote to places, have an election for places ballot measure and a November election, that today, that no vote will cost the city $4,016,000. Correct?
Yes, if
There's no
there's a
election.
vote later to replace it, so it's $4.2 million per quarter. And even with the vote, it would not be able to be collected until April 1st, so that's $4.2 million as well.
In other words, it's the best scenario
Yes.
if it doesn't pass today.
It doesn't get on the November election, it'll cost the city $12.6 million. Is there something?
So on the line, we have our consultants who've been helping us, they helped us back in 2016 as well as this cycle. So, and Catherine Liu, who wants to add to.
She's from the Lou Evans group.
Hey, Manager, Mayor, Council, it is great to see you. I was going to say this evening, but it actually is the morning, so it is good to see you this morning. I thought it was important to enter the conversation at this time to again reinforce, and I trust that you have been informed of this already. You began to have a discussion about the prospect of a special election and what cash flow may be lost to the city by delaying an election. I think it is important for you to be aware, in my professional judgment, it would cost the city far more simply because the city's chances of renewing the measure at that point would be diminished greatly. So certainly there would be no way for the city council to presume, and as such, it would be my professional judgment that proceeding in a special election would likely not be a viable proposition. And I know this because of my other experience with clients who frankly have contacted me after successful elections and asked for Lou Edwards Group assistance. And then I said, oh, well, to renew your measure, it feels to me as though it may have sunsetted already. And in those instances, it has been very hard to renew those measures. Do remember that once this measure expires, the city would be in the position of placing a new tax measure on the ballot. It would not be extending a measure that was scheduled to expire. So I just wanted to add that professional input and expertise into the conversation at the city council were previously not aware. Thank you.
We don't have another question. Currently, with the existing, with the 1% that's currently being collected right now, transaction use tax, has it been enough to provide all the services this community needs?
No.
My next question is, with the rising inflation, I mean, everything's going up. With that current 1%, I'm assuming it's going to provide even less, pay for even less services. Right?
Absolutely.
And currently, right now, what services do you see happening in the community? I know that's a loaded question, but I just want to make sure we're all aware.
Municipal government is essentially a public service-oriented business. We provide services. In order to provide services, we need people to provide those services. We are not widget makers. We don't make things and produce things and put it out there. We provide services. We require people with expertise in areas to to assist our residents in various things. At the end of the day, that is a very loaded question, but essentially simple at the same time. Without people, without quality people, we are unable to provide anything from public safety to planning services for people who want to develop their homes. We can't maintain our parks so that people can enjoy that portion of their quality of life. We can't have meetings like these. We have to by law, but we have to scale it back down. We're going to have these sergeant at arms here to make sure that everyone's safe when they're walking out. There's a cost of doing business in what we do with public service. We talked about homeless tonight. A lot of people talked about just trying to navigate through the challenges of homeless population and getting those folks the assistance that they need. We're unable to do that at the very minimum right now. There are a lot of positions in the city that are single sole positions where you only have one of something, right? So for example, after the layoffs, a lot of the departments were, after layoffs about 10 years ago, a lot of departments were minimized to the bare bones, where you have that situation of one of each, and one person in one function. And so at this juncture, even with the sales tax measure in 2016, we've still struggled to build that workforce in order to provide these services. And so, I guess that's the long way of saying we're already running thin. We're gonna continue to run thinner when inflation, recession comes into play. Right now, it is a job seekers market. Post-COVID, people are looking at their lives and their quality of lives and taking, a lot more time, a careful thought at what kind of jobs they want, what kind of community they, want to be in, who they want to work for, how much money they want to make, what benefits they're getting. And so we lose people, and then we can't get people to come here, we can't attract people to provide these services. So we are trending at a downward spiral, regardless of what this leadership and this council wants to do to move things forward. I would say this council in the last 11 months has been very supportive of, just fresh ideas, creative revenue generating ideas, and thinking a bit outside of the box. And it's no fault of this council for those sins of the past per se, but we are severely impacted as it is.
Thanks, Rita. So it sounds like we to this point, to this day, we still have not recovered from all of the layoffs.
We have not recovered from the loss of redevelopment funds. That would probably be the catalyst for the downward spiral of Westminster's finances.
And so we haven't really recovered from all these years from those massive layoffs, from the loss of the development funding. And if we were to lose even more funding and even more layoffs, it sounds to me like it's pretty grim hope that we would even come even close to recovery. If we were to lose any more money, any more revenue, any more staff.
If you lose a large revenue generating source, there is definitely no recourse because you cannot capture the amount that you need to make up for that deficit. I will say, and can't speak for the past, but past decisions and a different culture and different way of thinking has led us to where we are at the moment. And I would say that based on the new leadership and the direction that we want to move in, that's been different from the past. I would say that it would be unfair to, in essence, punish this particular leadership, by not having a large revenue source so that we can move forward the way that we should have in years past, whether that's better investments, more development, economic development, shifting focuses to enhancing our city and our quality of life, but that just can't be done without a large revenue source.
Yeah, I get that. The things that I look at is that, I've lived in the city since the late 80s. With my job, that allows me to drive around quite a bit to many cities around, not just Orange County, but every county. It just seems to me that I see so much growth, and I've seen so much growth in other cities, and it seems to our city has just been stagnant for so many years. And I just don't understand how. I get it now that you get into every single detail about why we are where we are today. It's just very disheartening to see other cities, even our neighboring cities, Stanton, they've been growing so much, and we've just been treading water for so long, and it's just hard for me to see that. Years and years ago, I remember Stanton was like, oh yeah, everybody talked down about Stanton, now it's really pretty good right about now. That's all the questions I have for right now.
So I have a question. So if there is a special election in March or April,
City Council have to decide probably in December, correct?
Generally, yes. So there's a timeline. So if you wanted an election in March, that first Tuesday in March, usually you would have to have documents in by that first or second Friday in December, and that's just an estimate off the top of my head. And if you do it in April, then you just shift that. You just shift that timeline of what the deadline is, but we can confirm with the registrar of voters what that would look like. The only difference is if you get it in March and then, potentially it's certified by the end of March, then you could start collecting taxes as early as July 1st as opposed to October 1st.
City Manager, speakers, I know we've had this conversation in the past, but can you explain again the possibility of other agencies taking the other 0.25 or 0.5?
1.5. So the state law allows 2, but the county with OCTA already has a half of that. So there's 1.5 available, of which currently we have 1 of that. But if we didn't have it, another agency could get it, and once it's gone, it's gone. We can't get it if they have it. So, like OCTA has it now with a 0.5%. If they took another 0.5%, then that would be off the table, would not be available to us.
What's keeping them from doing that?
Well, I'm not, right now they have not done it. I don't know what's keeping them from it, but they have not done it.
The reality is, we don't know what's happening behind the scenes at OCTA. We do know that, the 405 improvement project, when we first presented it to the public, actually, my first day on the job 17 years ago, was the first day we had public hearings for that here in the city. It was a $1.2 billion project, and that was huge. Actually, if you think about it, it was in the 700s. And then it became a $1 billion project, and that was huge news. And 2, and right now we're staring at a $2 billion project. So that's $2 billion. They have projects A through Z identified as part of their measuring plan, and they're doing really well. They're showing performance. So again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we do know that their revenue is trending lower. Not necessarily the revenue, the cost of all the projects that they promised them that they're are essentially escalated due to labor, COVID delays, material costs, you're familiar with that. So as a result of that, it's very likely there's a possibility that they could be looking for another 0.5 based on past performance. They're halfway through the program.
Sounds to me like they could just probably be watching and seeing what we're doing, what we've done. Just to get a game plan on what they want to do.
It is that there's regional agencies, AQMB, for example, a regional agency that manages to put things on the ballot, and it becomes more of a Southern California thing. Everybody votes on that, and somehow those seem to get by, right? And then the money at that point is going to the entire region. OCTA, I guess it's still in the county, right? But the reality is there are other agencies outside Orange County that could collect our money and use it where they see fit.
Thank you. Anybody?
Right, any other questions from the council?
I have something else to say. Nobody else is prepared to say anything. Go ahead. All right. I was going to say some closing remarks, but
So you're really not gonna let us vote? And nobody's gonna talk?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you, really.
Well, okay, so you're asking me to talk, and I am going to talk. I was just I think before I conclude, if you would bear with me, and I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts from a business person's point of view. I tried to wrap my head around this whole concept tax and I believe in learning from the past. I do. And I want to make sure we don't repeat the same, the same problem, or we don't want to repeat this in the future. So I just want to say that when I read her staff report, as stated in the staff report, I want to say that over 30 years, Westminster finances relied heavily on the state of California redevelopment funds to help maintain basic services and staffing levels, providing assistance toward business development, etc. It's true, we lost $30 million per year in revenues. That resulted in a budget shortage. Now, I put the blame on the leadership of the city at that time for misusing redevelopment funds. These funds were supposed to be used only for the section of the town that needed revitalization. So, like I said, I'm always going to look back to see what lesson we could learn and how we got here. So that's one thing. I'm going to try to not be redundant. I don't want to repeat what staff already said. So a little bit of history. I think I like to bring a little bit of history. And what I want to say is hopefully, I'm saying mostly to this council, so that this council doesn't think that the public is blaming you, this council, and I don't think we should be blamed. So that's first thing, is that, I'm realizing that this is something that happened long ago, over 30 years, and the leadership, the previous leadership, made decisions. So I want to kind of go back a little bit, okay, to 1945. I promise, I'll be really quick, but I think I'd like to shed light, and then towards the end, I will tell you, I promise I'll tell you how I'm going to vote, okay? A bit of history. 1945, California legislature enacted the Community Redevelopment Act to assist local governments in eliminating blight through development, reconstruction, and rehab of residential, commercial, industrial, and retail districts. Redevelopment allowed cities to collect a larger share of property taxes from property declared blighted and placed into a redevelopment area. As property tax revenue goes up in those redevelopment areas, the revenue would go up as well. And so that was the intended, the intention of the RDA funds. These revenues were to be used to fund projects that would help economic growth within the redevelopment area. Some could help pay for a portion of the salaries of the city employees who worked on redevelopment activities. In the year of, I'd like to mention that in the year of 1982 to 1999, changes were made by the council, the previous council, to the project area that they wanted to claim as redevelopment area or redevelopment zone. So in 1982, they started claiming 188 acres as the redevelopment area. And then it was amended in 1986. So that was the first amendment. They added another 30 acres. Then the second amendment, that was in 1987, just a year later. They added 465 acres more. And then a third amendment in 1989, 213 acres. And then they added another 1,188 acres in 1991, totaling 2,076 acres. So that was 1991. And nothing was added until the year of 2000. They added the entire city, 6,000 acres. So they called the entire city as a redevelopment zone. So they received a whopping $30 million, so that's how we got the $30 million a year for at least 11 years. Then the RDA came to a screeching halt when the state dissolved all RDA agencies. So I'll point out a few things that I thought was, but I'm going to move on to my points. So basically, the council at that time lacked ideas for revenue. Over time, council would rather use this account for other expenditures rather than come up with ideas for expenditure. Westminster City Council at the time subsidized a larger share of their employee salaries as time went on. It was just kind of like an easy thing to do, just tap that account, and increasingly rely on the RDA or redevelopment dollars to fund our day-to-day operations until 2011, as I stated. 2011, when state dissolved the RDA agencies and funding, it came to a screeching halt. So we got quite greedy. We called the entire city as redevelopment zone, so we got 30 million. I think the council at the time realized that, hey, if the bigger the more acres I claim, the more money I'm gonna get. But when you run, just like when you run your business, if you run it correctly, well, you wouldn't use this item for that expense, and you want to make sure to use the item, and I'm sure Aaron back me up on that, right? So if we budget something for that's the line item we're going to use for that intended purpose, then we stay with that. But we ended up using that money for paying just everything. And financing our employees, and these are employees that did not involve in redevelopment. We could get reimbursed. We were supposed to just pay employees that were involved in the redevelopment of the city or the zone. In this case, it's the entire city. So some important points to be made I want to emphasize is it was reported that at the time that Westminster did not pass a state audit because some of its positions were fully funded by money from the RDA. So that's why I'm saying that if we, as a council, if we are not looking at this from a business standpoint, we will say things like, can we just use ARPA COVID funds to offset our deficit? And if the entire council say yes, and we have a majority, is the other thing, then we would be in trouble again. So no, we should not be using ARPA COVID funds for things like, we have to use it the way we should be, as the Fed stated, right? And then not only that, in 2012, we cut a check, and you tell me if I'm wrong, $60 million we gave back to the state. Why did we even have $60 million? So instead of investing that money in revitalizing as we were supposed to, and in the economic of our city, we cut a check, $60 million. It just sat in the bank, and it didn't make any money. We didn't turn a profit. And so we had the opportunities to purchase the county buildings for a real cheap price, but we did not. And in 2012, the mass layoff, like I said, $30 million was not rolling in anymore, so therefore, and we were using it in the wrong way, we paid for staff. So 80 staff, that include police officers, were laid off. Since then, we added some positions back and repurposed others, but we are currently operating very lean, that is without waste. First, I'd like to say that I am really against raising taxes. But, I don't know if anybody wants to speak before I conclude. You want to go ahead, and I'll conclude later.
No, thank you for those words. I mean, I think we have to face the facts as far as what the current 1% has been able to do for us, and those we have been staying in the field, just operating at a very, very minimum. But the fact of the matter is that inflation is going up. There's a possibility inflation is going up, and it's just cost, contractual costs, all different things are going up. It's just a fact. And also the fact that there is a possibility of another agency coming and taking that 0.5 that's out there if we do not do this and place this on the ballot measure. Those are the facts. That we can't hide from that. So if you're looking at this I don't want to sit there and say, get upset, but if you're looking at this as a business standpoint, if you're a business person and you're for businesses, a lot of people say they're for business, for small business. How does it make sense to have your business lose this kind of money and expect your business to survive and have your business just lay off all your employees? It's not good business. And supposedly that's what some of us are for business. I'm for small business. But that's just me. If you're looking at it as a business point of view, business aspect, it's not good business to cost your company over $12 million loss for 3 quarters. It's not good business. You can't survive that. But that's not what's before us. We do not have the authority to raise taxes. That's for the voters to do. And I hope the council really understands that like I've said before in other meetings, your political opponents, our political opponents are going to say whatever they're going to say whatever they want, they're going to make up whatever lie they want.
Ok, tức là đúng ra là tối nay bây giờ mọi người đang chờ là hội đồng thành phố bỏ phiếu, tức là cần 4 phiếu yes mới thông qua để mà nộp hồ sơ lên trên quận để quận đưa cái dự luật này vào cái phiếu vào tháng 11 để bầu cử, tức là ăn ké theo cái mùa bầu cử tháng 11 này. Nếu mà không có ăn ké theo tháng 11 này thì tháng 12 là cái sẽ hết hạn cái phần thuế mà năm 2016 cử tri đã thông qua, tức là đợi đến năm tới bắt đầu phải đưa ra một cái dự luật mới thì có thể sẽ phải tốn thời gian hơn mới thông qua được. Và như vậy thì cái cô tổng quản trị cô nói là cứ nếu mà bây giờ mới thông qua thì thành phố đã mất hết 4,2 triệu, còn đời đến năm tới thành phố sẽ mất 10 mấy triệu. Tại vì cái thời gian chờ đợi bây giờ nói lung tung, bây giờ vẫn chờ kết quả coi là có thông qua hay không. They have a right to vote if their ADU application will be delayed during the process. They have a right to vote if they want to live in a city where graffiti and trash is not removed, furniture and discarded are not picked up on the streets. They have a right to choose. They have a right to vote if our PDs are cut. Residents' lives are
life and safety is literally at risk. We must do what we were elected to do, protect our residents, put their needs before our political ambitions. We must not play games. We must not play politics with the lives of our community. Move our city forward is a common term used by some of us here on this council. Not voting to give our residents an opportunity to vote will cost our city to lose millions of dollars. And that is not moving our city forward. If we're afraid that our political opponents are going to make up lies and say we raise taxes, causing our city to go bankrupt is a lot worse than that, and that will not be a lie. If we do not vote yes for democracy and place this measure on the November ballot, it will be a colossal failure on our part, and there will be no hiding from that. And it will follow us forever. We took an oath to protect our city, not to destroy it. So with that said, I make a motion to place the ballot measure on the November 8th ballot, asking Westminster voters whether they want to extend the current voter-approved transactional use tax until ended by voters, and considering what we spoke about, the cost of inflation and what it's going to, and how limited we have been, I want to ask for it to be at 1.25.
Just for the record, in the recommendation, we have a resolution that would need to be approved.
And bring back the resolution.
A copy of the ordinance is also at the 1.25, which is attachment number 4, would be attached to that resolution. And so the motion would also include first reading of that ordinance, although the ordinance is approved ultimately by the people if they vote for it.
Yes, thank you, City Attorney. That is my motion.
Well, we have the motion on the floor.
Okay, if there's no support for 1.25, then I want to amend my motion to be at the 1% with the attached resolution.
With the same, in this case, it would be attachments number 1 and 2.
Yes, that is my motion.
Are you guys are all gonna sit there with your pompous asses and pretend?
Hold it. We should take it. I second.
Well, we have a motion and a second.
Well, before I say that, before I do that, I want to say, okay, so I am against raising taxes, but I do believe in giving people the right to vote.
Before we vote, I just want to kind of... Go ahead.
Is it okay? Okay. It will harm public safety officers if we vote no. They are transferring jobs to they are right now transferring jobs to another city that is more financially stable. And I don't blame them. They have to look after their families. Mind you, that real people work here and serve the community. If we vote no, we're telling them that we don't care for them, for their families. We're going to be decimated when you play politics. And in politics, I hope not. They invested years in our community, so we need to think of them. Our financial crisis is not their fault, so they should not pay the price. And neither should the retirees that are counting on their pensions. It is, as I concluded, that it was the fault of previous leadership years before we came on board, all of this council, before all of us came on board. And it will take time to correct it. I put public safety first. I put my constituents first. I do respect democracy, our constitutional rights. So I vote yes to put it on the ballot. Thank you.
Well, just to reflect, thank you, Councilmember Ho. This is an important issue. This is this today, having this, giving our residents the right, the American right. That's why we're all here. I don't know if council realizes every one of us on this council is either a refugee or an immigrant. And we're here in this country because of democracy. Because in other countries where 4/5 of this council came from, they lacked democracy and lost the country because of it. We had another thing that we had, and one of the items that we had before us that we couldn't get to today was the effects of, what is this, the effects, the victims of communism. Let me remind council that communism is the opposite of democracy. I really hope this council can see the utter hypocrisy that we'll be doing if we do not defend democracy here tonight.
I do have two reasons why I would not go for 1.5 or 1.25. Number one is I think it would be we're more likely to have a majority or supermajority voting for an extension, because this would not be an increase in the earned tax, but rather it's an extension of the SS measure. We're just extending it out and to give us more time to bring in more revenue. So that's.
Thank you for that. So, Mayor.
Well, I still have a motion. And I just want to make sure it's clear, state law requires that we have 4 positive affirmative votes from the council in order to place a transaction and use tax. So in order to pass it, we require 4 votes.
Before we vote, make comments. First off, I just want to thank you for all the residents, all the city employee staff showing up in the audience and speak behind us. Thank you for being in the arena. The credit belongs to those actually inside the arena. I've been in this arena a little over 3.5 years, and from day one, I fought for the city. Those who've been following the city council, what I have done to fight for what we have right now. The first time I introduced code of ethics is make the news. Very simple, code of ethics. And it's a long way from what it was. If you look at it, the city is being transformed, a lot of changes. The tax measure, it was introduced in 2016 because the city facing bankruptcy. And, the city council got that and put it on the ballots. In May, the sunset clause on that. And we asked, the city asked the resident to support the tax measure, just like one of the speakers mentioned earlier. The resident didn't want to lose our police department, didn't want the city to lay off workers, city staff. And they were hoping that in 6 years, that the city council and the city would do something and transform the financials landscape of the city. But look at what happened in the past 6 years. Nothing had done.
You've been here before.
Well, I've been fighting for changes for the past 4 years.
All right.
You know, and some of the comment earlier, the saying that I'm against the police department. Which is just so you know, I've been a police officer for 26 years. My son's born and raised here, is also a police officer. I'm one of the only 5 active police officers that got elected in this entire state out of 93,000 police officers. I've been fighting for the city since day one. And telling me that I'm not supporting police is an insult. Well, look at what the city has done for the past few years. We sold parkland. Nobody knows what's going on in the city. How that happened. And tried to sell City Hall to the developers. And we give tax break for a hotel project for several decades. And there's no effort bringing new revenue into the city at all. I mean, talking about taxation without representation. It's a dictatorship, right? It's my job in this council to fight for everybody. Fight for those who cannot, fight for themselves. I'm holding this council to be responsible for the self-tax. We're unable to generate revenue. It's just the tax is like depends on tax. Depends on your rich parents. If your parents give you a check every month, then you have to go to work. Just put your hands out. Mom and dad put money in your hands, and that's it. So I'm a voice for those who cannot come here and speak. I've been walking the neighborhoods for the past 2 months, knocking on doors at the council. Many people told me that they do not approve the continuation of the subject. Why?
Let them vote. Yeah.
Because they disapprove what the council is doing.
They can circle the no.
So, we asked the citizens to pass the sales tax 2016, so we can maintain and improve quality of life, right? But nothing has been done at all. I have no subject to ask the taxpayer to continue to give us more money, so that we're going to continue more in fighting. Continue to, there's rules about it.
Let us vote.
So, I have only one vote in this council. One vote. And this council does not need my vote to pass this. There's 4 other councils. So I'm just voicing my concern because there's always responsibility.
So you're punishing the residents of Westminster because you didn't go your way for 4 years? That's what you're saying?
There is no effort to change, to bring in new revenues. We just ban everything. And we will continue to use it, the tax
continue spending using the tax money, and this council will not do anything else to bring new revenues. So I have to voice my concern. I'm not against the tax measure. I'm not against the citizens voting for the tax. I'm against the city and council continue to use tax money and spending without making an effort to bring in new money. That is my objection.
But it's not your.
Well, can I,
Let us vote.
excuse me, members of the audience, just remember, though, I respect what you're saying, but I have an issue with that because, which I am thankful for. The issues that you brought when you first came onto this council were legitimate, and I felt it on. You're trying to clean up what was going on, so that's great. What I see going on, you said that this council has failed to bring in revenue. Some of the items that can bring this revenue to the community, which is going on all around us, council also plays politics with those decisions as well. Because how is that decision going to affect how voters, if they're going to vote for me or not? So, and how, what revenue source is out there that this council can generate 17 million? What revenue can we possibly, can you think of that can generate that kind of revenue? Any decision is any council would bring to this community can generate that kind of money. And the fact is that where we are, the facts as far as how much we get from property tax that was locked in at 1972. 1972, that those rates were locked in. How can we operate? There is no mathematically way that we can operate with that fact that those tax rates were locked in 1972. It's impossible. That's why, and I agree with you. There is, we've spoken about creative ways to generate revenue, but there was no action. Council froze. I'm scared because the election season is coming, and I don't want to vote for it right now. Let's just put it on pause, push it down the road. We're voting today on democracy, whether we feel that members of this community have a right to vote for something. If they agree with you, they can vote no. But we can't say you don't have a right to vote. And I just do not agree with what you said. We're in this country because we have democracy here. This is a democratic country. And we cannot prevent residents from voting, having a voice. If they see how you see it, then they can vote no. It's that simple. They can vote no. But you can't say, no, I'm going to decide for you because I want to punish previous council's actions. I'm going to punish previous council's actions, and I'm not going to give you an opportunity to vote. That is not something that makes any sense to me.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So, one and a half, I said no to the 1.5, and I said 1.25. And I didn't mention my second reason is because I wanted to force this council to drum up more revenue. So that would force us to come up with more revenue. And we have to, because as you can see the financial report, we're not going to be able to, there will be a shortfall of about $3 million if we don't. So that will force us to do that, come up with more revenue. And because one cent tax is not gonna be enough, okay? And right now, what we're suggesting to put on the ballot would be an extension of the same thing, the 1 cent tax. And it will take time to get because the $17 million shortfall is really going to become around 20 million because of inflation, correct? So it will, for us to clear 17 million or 20 million, we're going to have to make a lot more than that. So what kind of business would we be in, to make it, in a snap of the finger? Because number one, we did have, the problem is that we shouldn't have a 6-year sunset clause. Okay, so we have a 6-year sunset clause, and we spent 3.5 years fighting COVID, pre-COVID, COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. We're still, we're not in the clear yet. So, as you can see, that no cities ever propose a 6-year sunset clause. Everyone is mostly permanent 1 cent tax. Is that correct? Yes.
Most of them.
And then, so like I said, how can you gotta be reasonable. You gotta be reasonable to the people. I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about the council. I'm talking about the people. We cannot come up with, $20 million in a year. And that would be very magical if we could. And so, that would be totally unreasonable to expect that. So like I said, if we take our time and, in the future, if we increase revenue and we're successful, then we can always ask to lower the tax, right? So the California Constitution says that no tax can be adopted by City Council. It must be approved by voters. City Council only has the option of putting it on the ballot so the people could vote. So I don't know what is the hesitation. I don't know. I'm very conservative, and I'm as you can see, I go back and I make sure I understood why we are in this predicament. So, I think we should vote for it, and I'm calling on my colleagues to please vote for it.
Yes, and thank you for that. Go ahead.
We've been in the predicament for 6 years. And I remember this issue was brought up during the 2020 election. And, Mayor Treetop would say, yeah, there's 2 more years. He didn't vote for that. So, he's the one who put the sunset clause on this tax measure. And I think right now, this vote can solve the problem. So I'm calling for Mayor Treetop to do the right thing.
Councilor Maduro, I think that you don't have to ask me to do the right thing. I think that for the last few years, I'm not really happy, that a lot of issues on this city council, and you actually, getting a lot of tension, and that's a fact. You vote for what you believe, and if you believe that, hey, you don't want to put a measure on the ballot, hey, that is your belief. 6 years ago, 6 years ago, when I came up with the census, because I believe that the city council, we have 6 years to work together to come up with a really good solution. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I am the only one over the council too. I realized something happened to the city. I think we are taking responsibility. We have 5 members of the city council. It's not
before us today is whether how we feel about that, the measure, the tax measure. It's whether we think that, whether we believe in democracy or not, whether we think the residents have a right to vote. That is before us.
I had a second, I had the, I came up with the clause that says, because I believe that, that was temporary. Tax is not like permanent. But the City Council for the last few years, we've been fighting on and off with some of the not important issues.
Yeah.
But we can't punish the people.
Yeah. This is the issues that the issues that we've been, this council has divided, this council has been, the issues of ethics, the issues of, monuments. We have the issue of when there's something integrity was put in question. Those are not issues that the community should be punished for. We're asking our community, we're voting on allowing our community to vote. That's what's before us. That's what's before us, and I just, so like I said earlier, this will be a colossal failure on our part to not vote for democracy. This is going to, if we do not allow the residents to vote, that's going to follow each and every one of us who votes no. So we all, 4 of us here are running for election. And that's going to follow us wherever we go. There's no hiding from that. It's going to, I can guarantee you that the political opponents are just waiting to see what we do tonight. Because those will not be lies that will prevent democracy. I will stand with you if they come up and say, did you raise taxes? I'll speak up and say, no, you didn't. Because you don't have the authority to raise taxes. Only the voters do.
I think that we all know that the community out there thinking about our action tonight. I think that we will understand our community. So I think that each of us will make a reason for our voting. So I think the policy on this discussion. 6 years ago, we spent time to come up with a sunset because at the time I think I was statement clearly 6 years ago that was already for temporary. I still remember.
You know, for the city to be in good financial health, for those of you who depend or are thinking about the $29 million in reserve, I asked earlier how long it took for us to build up that reserve, and the answer was 6 years. So for us to be in good financial health, we should not be using that reserve. And I know some of you might be thinking and eyeing on that, using that reserve down to nothing before you take action. Or maybe that if you're thinking that maybe after your election, then we'll do something about it. But that's not right. We have to act now.
I know the answer to this. Is it good business is that what the reserves is for? To use them up? Because we don't want to, to me it's not good business to be using up the reserves. That's not what they're for. It takes a long time to build up the reserves. Our community is going to suffer. There's no way that our community that we can generate that kind of revenue at 1972 tax rate, property tax rate is impossible.
You know, it took, I remember the table, I think if we were to use our reserve, it would take like 1.5 years, right, to use it up. it took us, 6 years to build it up to that level, and then we've got the recession, that wouldn't be right.
Correct, it did take us that long to reach that, and I also want to mention that we do have a fund balance policy that says we won't go below 17%, which is, for the current year, almost 13 million. So as soon as we go down to that 8 million, it's below our fund balance policy. So that's an approved policy that the council approved with the budget adoption. And that's a best practice from GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association.
So again, we spoke about this before, so a no vote today is going to cost our residents. If this council has an idea, or if the next council is going to have it, because we don't want to be the ones to vote for this, that the next council is going to hold a special election for sometime in the spring. So a no vote today is going to cost our residents $12.6 million today. We do not vote to have this measure on the November 8th ballot. Just think about that for a minute. A no vote today for a November 8th election is going to cost the residents $12.6 million. How can you run on that?
Mayor and Council, if I could just add one point on the November election ballot. If the council chooses not to place it on this November ballot, it does change the narrative for the ballot question. It no longer state that it is an extension, because once the tax has expired, you would ultimately be placing to your voters that it is a new tax, even at 1%, it is a new tax. So I want to make that clear. And leaving it away, I'm pretty sure that's
100% correct.
And then we also heard from our consultant, can we reiterate what she spoke about the possibilities with it going to a special election?
Well, if I can recollect, again, the tax expires, so there no longer would be a tax. So if you then go for an election in March, April, May, anytime after that, it's a new tax. So that's one issue. Second of all, it's not a general election, it's a special election. And in special elections, it's more difficult to get something like that adopted. That's just the facts. So that there's a higher risk of that. I believe those are the things you mentioned, and maybe more, I'm not sure.
So then today, I know having this ballot measure on November 8th election literally sink this city with everything you just said. It can literally sink to maybe absolutely no way to recover from the evidence.
I have a question for the city manager. What you just said, when is the expiration of asset management? Is that the end of the December?
December 31st.
Yes. Also, just
So any time that you go before the end of December, it should be the tax increase. What did you say?
if you were to vote on it, if people were to vote on it to extend it, then before it expires, then it's an extension of the existing tax. That's why it's framed the way it is right now. Once it expires, you won't have to lose your interest rate.
In March, especially with the tax, I'm sure you have heard about it, because the council to agree increasing the tax.
Just remember, you guys aren't personally extending it, you're just allowing us to vote.
Yes.
Allowing for democracy, allowing the residents to have a choice, to have a vote. We do not have the authority to raise taxes.
Okay, so, City Council, so,
Well, there is a motion and a second on that floor.
well, the motion and, second on the floor.
Ok, bây giờ họ bắt đầu vote đây nha.
Thank you, Mayor. The motion was made by Vice Mayor Monroe, seconded by Councilmember Phô, and that is to place the measure on the November 8th ballot. And it would include
The attachments 1 and attachments 2 at the 1%.
I'm sorry, Zoom's made it kind of difficult, but our consultant wanted to speak, so it's up to the mayor if you want to allow her to speak.
What City Council, so,
Yes.
okay.
Good morning. I just wanted to clarify, because I believe the question for, a moment ago was about what I said. So what I stated was that, our recommendation on the consultant side to consider placing this measure on the ballot was contingent on the feedback that we had from the community of an interest in taking an action on an extension. As your city attorney has indicated, once the tax expires, any future action by the council would be to place a brand new measure on the ballot. So there certainly cannot be any assumption that doing so would be viable. Thank you.
Maybe perhaps repeat the survey that you did. What was the result of the survey?
Yes, unfortunately, Mr. Sonnenschein had to depart because he had to get ready for a business trip. But at the high water mark, both rates were in the 70 percentiles. Actually, one of them crossed over to the 80 percentile. Let me just remember that. Yes, the increase reached 81% for a simple majority requirement to measure, and the renewal reached 78% at the high water mark for a simple majority requirement measure.
Can you, Catherine, can you repeat what you had spoken about earlier as far as the possibility of voters approving the new tax measure in a special election?
Yes, as you have asked me a direct question, I'll give you a direct answer. It has been our advice to the city that in no manner can we assure you that the tax would be viable, because the tax will have expired. And what I said about, 30 minutes ago or however long it was, I said in those instances where cities allow the taxes to lapse, it is far harder to reenact a brand new tax. So I think it's important for the council to factor this dynamic in, because the tenor of the conversation seems to suggest that there's a presumption that one could simply wait and put it on the ballot in the future and it would be successful. And what I would like to say forcefully is that that presumption is incorrect, because all of the reaction so far has been to renew what already exists. As the tax is scheduled to expire in December, any future measure moving forward would not be based on the renewal, but would be to ask the community to consider a brand new tax. In their judgment, it would be much harder to reenact.
Is this a high percentage compared to your other clients you work for?
The viability numbers, and I might add that the measure carries at 70% in every council district, and the strongest base of support is among Vietnamese voters at 76%. I will tell you that, heartbreakingly for many of our other cities, we have had to deliver bad news to other cities all year that they in fact are not vital, when the city of Westminster is viable with significant cushion. To be in the high 70 percentiles and at 81% for a simple majority requirement measure would be, well, many of my other cities that are unable to proceed would love to switch places with you. So there are many cities that unfortunately are not in position to consider this type of viability and community interest.
Thank you.
Anything else?
The motion was made by Vice Mayor Mondo, seconded by Councilmember Ho, and that was
Rồi hồi nãy là cái bà
to place the ballot measure on the November 8th.
chuyên gia bà nói thêm một lần nữa là nếu mà không thông qua hôm nay mà mai mốt thì sẽ phải là tăng thuế, ra một cái đạo luật mới để tăng thuế chứ không phải là gia hạn nữa, sẽ khó khăn hơn. Bây giờ là bắt đầu là bỏ phiếu.
Relating the transactions and use tax measures to the voters at the November 8th, 2022 general municipal election, and taking certain related actions, and to introduce an ordinance for first reading entitled an ordinance of the city of Westminster, California, under chapter 3.11 transactions and use tax of 2022 to title 3 revenue and finance of the Westminster Municipal Code. And that is to be read by title only and waive further review. Councilmember Doe?
Abstain.
Councilmember Ho?
Yes.
Councilmember Glenn?
Well, I'd like to say a few words for the record. First of all, I'd like to thank the resident who put them out against your mind. It's not that I disrespect you, but we need to make the right decision, and each one of us have a different mindset about it. For me, that there will be at least 2, if not 3, new council members to be on board. And whatever the decision that we make tonight, it will affect, for a long time. And I'd like to see that, it's important for them to engage in our city future. Because they are the one who lived through the period that what we made, what we designed today. So there's no doubt that our city currently faces serious financial challenges, and we must protect our public safety and community service. There's no question about it. But at the same time, we need to consider the new economies and the majority of them too.
Councilmember Lynn, may I interrupt you for a second? Well, this vote is not for them. This vote is for the residents. This vote is not for us. This vote is for the residents. So it has nothing to do with the new council.
The new council is the one who represent people and make the decision. That's why we are the
The voters would make the decision.
The voters-
What about kids?
The voters vote, not the council. Doesn't matter who's up here.
I think that Councilman Wayne, he wants to make his point, please.
So my vote is abstain. However, I like to have another, after the vote, I like to make a motion.
What's the number?
But from what I understand, in order for me to be able to motion to have a reconsideration vote, City Attorney, I need to vote no, correct?
Yes, if there's a motion and in this particular situation, if it fails and you wanted to do a motion for reconsideration, it would have to be somebody who voted against it. They would have to make that motion to reconsider their vote. It would have to be made by somebody in that situation. If that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Again, council, we need to really think hard about it. We spoke about this earlier. The no vote today is literally going to sink the city. There is not going to be no recovery from it. Nothing that the next council is not going to come in with on a horse and save the day. It's not going to happen. It's up to us. Either we protect the city, save the city, or nobody else is going to do it. The next council will not be able to do it. So if we have two abstentions, I want to have the ability to motion to reconsider, and then I will call for a special election on the 12th. Can we do that? Will we have enough time? We have to vote first, right? Yes.
Not a special election, I think you're saying.
It's a special, excuse me, special meeting.
But you have two extensions right now, so
Yes, I know. My question before I voted was to the city attorney, as far as in order for me to give a motion for reconsideration, I would have to vote no. Correct?
That's correct.
That's why I'm asking. If I want to have the ability to vote make another motion to reconsider for this council to have a special meeting. This council needs to go home and sleep on it and think about it, really hard what's before us. I want to have the ability for us to have a special meeting. And when can we have a special meeting?
So the deadline is 5 p.m. on Friday, so you have to have a meeting earlier Friday so that per resolutions, to drive it down to the clerk of the board. So, last time we went through this pass, we had a meeting like at noon or.
Basically, the special meeting, we don't have to make any motion at this time. I think that our staff would ask all of us whether or not we want to have a special meeting.
If we're gonna have a meeting on Friday, there's a 24-hour noticing period, so for a special meeting, so I would need to know by tomorrow morning if we're gonna have a meeting or not, and then get a quorum.
Yes, but I think that we have the motion and the second on the floor, and we haven't completed
But there's no, I haven't voted yet. I haven't voted yet, and the mayor hasn't voted yet. So there's no way I can convince this council to reconsider.
I think that in the next several hours, all of us, we have to think. And, you decide for us to have a special meeting. And I believe that our city manager, we will schedule.
With all due respect, Mr. Mayor, if we hear what his motion will be?
What?
With all due respect, can we hear what Mr. Wynn's motion would be?
I can do that, but they have to vote first, because we have the motion and second on the floor, and they have to vote it.
I'm done. I vote yes. I'm done.
Mayor Tom.
Okay, now I'd like to propose,
Okay, we need to announce the vote.
Yes, please.
So the final vote was 3 abstentions by Alderman Shaw and yes vote by Councilmember Cole and Vice Mayor Monzo.
So the motion fails because it requires 4 affirmative votes.
okay, like I mentioned earlier, that there will be 2, possibly 3, Newcastle going to be on board after the elections. I would like to ask staff to schedule for the first meeting of December to bring this item back. So we can.
Why? So Todd can make the November election?
Okay.
Bye.
So,
It's not the same measure. You get that, right, Charlie?
We try to fix, but nothing happens.
You get it? Like, do you understand? It's not
Sorry,
the same
council, I try to
measure.
be respectful to this council. Now I'm very upset. This council is utter failure.
Absolutely.
okay, so my motion is to have staff bring it back.
What staff? We're not gonna have any, Charlie.
This is right now, this is a council meeting, comment, not your comments at this point, please.
You don't represent me. You just voted against my ability to vote.
It's my time.
Order. I think that if there is, I can force our next to add to agenda meeting if there is no.
If you don't want me to make a motion, then I will stop.
Charlie, you just failed all the residents of Westminster,
No,
so.
no, it's not.
Yes, you did.
That's okay. I'm not.
That's okay. He just said that's okay.
Yeah.
You have to call it to order that they need to be quiet.
Yes, I will, please, be quiet. Continue.
Okay, I asked staff to bring it back on the first meeting of December, so that this will be before the SS measure expires, so that way we can decide at that meeting.
Can someone tell him when it happens?
Let me clarify. I think this is important. You could bring it back at the first meeting in December, but the election itself would not take place until at least 88 days later, which would be in March or April. At that point in time, the tax would be expired. So the ballot question would have to be a new tax.
I think Councilmember Wayne understand that. Yeah.
He doesn't understand.
You just lost the city 12 million. I hope you have a good plan to make that up.
Well, may I ask you to bring it back 5 years budget projection, please? The slide.
What is there to talk about?
You just voted against it. What are you doing? Do you have any concept on how this works?
If we had any kind of, how would I say this, any ideas or illusions or that we're somehow going to create a little Saigon as a tourist attraction and bring all the, that is all gone. That would never happen. So thank you for that.
Well, so, if we look at the projections for 2023 and 2024, if we bring it back, now I'd like to inform it again, that if we decide to bring it back in December, according to what you said, that it will take 88 days to come to take us out there. And yes, it will be the amendment is expired. Yes, is that what you're saying? Yeah, sure about that. It's not when we make a decision.
No. So the council only has the ability to put a measure on the ballot. They don't have the ability to approve the tax. So if you were to meet in early December, it would be a decision to put a measure on the ballot. And it has to be at least 88 days until the actual election occurs. So it would be at least 88 days from whenever that December meeting occurred.
Okay.
Which would be March or April.
So let me ask you, you said 88 days, today is what? Today is August so December 11th, November 8th is our election day. Is that 88 days?
Well, we have to have an election date too, so I'd have to actually look to see what day would qualify for that. I'm not sure we could call a special election like for December, if that's what you mean.
And so you tell me that, if we decided tonight, and this morning, then is it 88 days on November 8th? No. Okay, thank you. So it's not 88 days even we decided tonight.
Only the November.
Sorry,
This is Mark. He's the attorney that specializes in these kinds of tax measures, so.
Sure. The answer to your question is that 88 days from Friday is the last day that it is 88 days before the November election. So that's why tonight's resolution would need to be adopted by Friday.
There's sort of thing we already vote, and I think that right now is 2 a.m. in the morning, so.
There's no way around it, and no vote, with this measure not being placed for the November 8th election, and we have till Friday to.
So we don't do this.
We cost our city $12.6 million, no matter what. There's no way around that. That's just a fact.
So I asked the council, why don't we adjourn the meeting and the next several hours, if some of us change our mind. So then we asked to stop this schedule.
So the other alternative at this juncture is you can adjourn this meeting to a regular adjourned meeting on Friday. If you can just decide on the time, there will just be a posting, but I don't have to do a brand new agenda and other things. But if you can decide on the time, then we can have this agenda just be a regular adjourned meeting.
Right.
But for Friday.
But if there is a desire to have an emergency meeting, then you still have that.
If there is a desire and you don't adjourn this tonight, then you have a very small window to decide in the morning, and for staff to be able to generate an agenda and a noticing in order to accomplish having a meeting on Friday, making a decision, and then whatever those documents end up being, if something is to be adopted, to get those to wherever they need to go.
My preference would be to continue the meeting to Friday, but maybe cancel it if there's no interest.
I'm for it, but I need to clarify something. If Councilmember, any of the Councilmember Doe, Wayne, or Mayor Tom,
So if there is no,
you have to be the ones that would make the motion.
so if there is no quorum until probably before a special meeting, so I'll start the meeting, correct? If there is no quorum.
So if you decide that you want to adjourn the meeting tonight, we're just gonna hypothetically say Friday at noon. We'll just adjourn the meeting on Friday at noon, or Friday at 11 a.m.
But if there is no.
And then if there is no quorum and you guys hit me up tomorrow and say that you're not interested in coming, the meeting just gets canceled.
So executive does it.
Yes.
No, I don't do that, or you know.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
I am too.
Why don't we do that? Okay.
Motion.
Yes, but City Attorney, can you explain, since the process in order for this to happen, since Councilmember Ho and I voted yes, can you explain?
I can explain that afterwards, but yes, I mean.
So I think that it's going to be important, because if Councilmember Doe, Wayne, or Mayor Todd, are they not in agreement to make a motion, then what's the point of meeting? If they're the ones that would have to make the motion.
They may change their mind between now and then.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They would have to be the ones to make
So there'd have to be a motion for reconsideration of the vote, as long as it's the same vote, it could be a different vote. Yeah. But if it was the same vote, and prove that 1% continuation, that would require a motion for reconsideration. And in order to reconsider, it would have to be made by someone who voted against it.
Well, the thing is that, you mentioned earlier that if there is no quorum by Friday, by tomorrow, or whatever, we have to let them get staff know about it and.
No, basically,
It's sorry, but,
yes, if we have the motion to continue the meeting on Friday, so there will be a meeting on Friday. And, like on Friday, if there is no quorum, so the meeting automatically canceled, and our city manager have to inform the meeting, am I correct?
Well, we would post a notice that the meeting was canceled. I mean, there's been instances where we actually have a meeting because no one says anything.
Right.
And we just announce that.
So basically, even if we make the motion tonight for a special meeting on Friday, but if there is no, yes, if there is no quorum, so the meeting will be canceled.
If there's no quorum, the meeting is canceled.
I move to have this special meeting on Friday.
But if we continue this item until Friday, at 11 or 12?
Okay.
All right.
We also have to go to nomination.
Say it again?
We also have to do nominations on that day, so if the council should consider having an earlier meeting to allow staff the opportunity
It's
to.
actually Thursday today.
Because we do need to, if the council were to decide and act out, we have to make sure that we have that to, the county, before the 5 o'clock deadline, and make sure that everything is fully executed.
So, my motion to have a continuation of this meeting on Friday at 11.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. There's a motion and second on the floor to continue the meeting on Friday.
Tức là họ đã bỏ phiếu là nghị viên Carlos Manzo là yes, nghị viên Camilo là yes, còn 3 người kia là bỏ phiếu trắng. Thành ra là họ sẽ đề nghị là tiếp tục họp lại vào trưa thứ 6. Tức là họ chỉ bỏ phiếu để sẽ tiếp tục họp lại vào trưa thứ 6.
Motion to approve.
All right, so next will be the motion to defer item 54 to September 14th meeting.
Và dời lại mấy cái vấn đề cổ thành quản trị đến tháng 9.
Thank you. That motion was made by Councilmember Morris, seconded by Councilmember Doe, to move, agenda item 3 to the meeting of September 14th. Councilmember Doe?
Yes.
Councilmember Doe?
Yes.
Councilmember Morris?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Alonso?
Yes.
Mayor Trump?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 5-0.
Cái này họ chỉ bỏ phiếu là dời lại mấy cái phần nghị trình chưa có nói chuyện đến tháng 9. Nói chung là những cư dân người bản xứ, cư dân người Mỹ Trắng họ rất là tức giận. Nhất là những cái này là thấy cảnh sát họ ủng hộ cái dự luật SS rồi mà. Tại vì họ muốn có được tiền thuế để mà có có thể
I use the F word a lot.
có thể
It's my
như là
favorite.
mướn cảnh sát. Thôi chắc mình cũng không có rảnh để mình phỏng vấn ai, mình về thôi. Chào các bạn nha. Rồi, cảm ơn các bạn đã theo dõi. Hẹn gặp lại các bạn trong những chương trình khác. Cảm ơn Sis KP lên đi nha. Chắc phải chạc phone, thành ra nó hơi âm thanh nó hơi bị ồn. Có gì mình sẽ lấy lại cái file từ trong thành phố để mình làm lại, rồi mình sử dụng một số hình ảnh của mình để mà edit vào thôi.
Ai xui miệt ấy ghé về thăm, bún cá phở quyên vẫn mãi thèm, hầm rục xương cá ngọt liệm, chả cá vàng tươi ngon giòn, nước lèo bốc khói thơm ngát, tương hành chanh ớt. Chị mời em ăn tô bún cá chứa chan tình người.
Xin mời quý vị đến với phở quyên, ăn một lần lại muốn ăn thêm. Phở quyên 714 896 0928 896 0928.